The night they handed me to the most dangerous man in the city, they thought I was broken. A widow, divorced, disposable. They didn't know I had built companies worth more than his entire empire. The hall was silent when the contract was signed. Crystal chandeliers glowed above a table of men who believed they had already won. Political donors, boardroom predators, former allies who had learned to smile while sharpening knives. To them, this marriage alliance was a burial, a convenient arrangement, a quiet way to erase a woman who had become too powerful to control. Across the room, the man they called a monster watched me with the stillness of a predator, and for the first time that night, I smiled, because monsters rarely recognize another predator until it's too late. 3 years earlier, my husband's heart stopped in the middle of a Tuesday morning board meeting. No warning, no goodbye. Just a collapsed body, a room full of executives, and a company worth $4 billion suddenly without its founder. People like to pretend grief is dramatic. It isn't. Grief is paperwork. Grief is lawyers whispering in hallways. Grief is watching men who once shook your hand begin speaking about you in past tense. I had built that company from nothing. Every acquisition, every negotiation, every sleepless quarter. But my name was never on the building. My ex-husband made sure of that years before the divorce. He took the credit. I built the strategy. When the board forced me out 18 months later, they called it stability, a graceful transition. The press called me a grieving widow who couldn't handle the pressure. What they didn't know was that I had already seen the betrayal coming. What they didn't know was that I had been quietly studying every man in that room for years. Power leaves patterns, fear leaves fingerprints, and desperation creates alliances. Which is how the proposal arrived, a marriage arrangement, not to a politician, not to a billionaire, but to the man who ruled the city's shadows, the Mafia boss whose name never appeared in newspapers, yet whose influence could make markets tremble and investigations disappear. The board thought it was humiliation, a final insult, a widow traded like currency to secure a political favor. But when the messenger placed the contract in front of me, I didn't feel anger, I felt curiosity. Because men who believe they are burying you rarely notice when you start digging upward instead. I signed the agreement that same night, and as I watched their relief spread across the room, one thought crossed my mind. They thought they were burying me, I saw the throne.
Before we continue, we welcome you to Afro-Korean love thrillers, the home of dark romance, forbidden passion, power, betrayal, and captivating revenge stories. Please do me a favor. Tap that comment section and tell us quickly where you are watching from. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any new thriller that drops here. Sit back and relax because this story is just getting started. Now let's get back to our story.
The first time I saw his mansion, it looked less like a home and more like a fortress that had learned to disguise itself as elegance. Black iron gates parted slowly as the car approached, the gravel driveway curving through rows of ancient oak trees, whose branches stretched like silent witnesses over the property. The house itself stood on a rise of stone and glass, lights glowing behind tall windows like watchful eyes. Power had a smell. Old money, control, fear. I stepped out of the car without hesitation. Inside, the silence felt deliberate. Guards stood at distant corners of the hall, their posture disciplined, their eyes carefully blank. A chandelier the size of a small car hung above polished marble floors, scattering cold light across the room. At the far end of the hall stood the man they called the most dangerous figure in the city, the Mafia Alpha. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. The posture of someone accustomed to command, the stillness of someone who never needed to raise his voice. He watched me the way a wolf studies something unfamiliar entering its territory. assessing, waiting for weakness. The room held its breath. Most women in this situation would have tried to appear softer, smaller, less threatening. I did the opposite. I walked toward him at an even pace and stopped a few feet away, meeting his gaze without challenge, but without submission either. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you understand where you are?" he asked. The question was simple, but it wasn't curiosity. It was a test. I studied him the way I once studied CEOs across negotiation tables. Posture, breathing, the tension in his shoulders, the faint impatience in his voice. Instead of answering immediately, I glanced briefly around the hall. Security positioned strategically. Too many cameras for a private residence. A household built for defense, not comfort. Then I returned my attention to him. "I understand exactly where I am," I said calmly. Something flickered behind his expression. Surprise. Perhaps irritation that fear hadn't appeared where he expected it. He stepped closer. Slowly. The quiet authority of a predator who had never needed to prove himself. "You don't look afraid." It wasn't a compliment. It was another test. I've spent 30 years in boardrooms filled with men trying to destroy each other politely. This feels refreshingly honest. A low murmur passed among the men standing nearby. He didn't react to them. His gaze remained fixed on me, studying, measuring, waiting for the moment I might falter. I didn't. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken calculations. Finally, he spoke again. "You understand this marriage is not sentimental." "Of course," I said. Then I allowed the smallest pause, just enough to shift the balance of the conversation. "I'm not here to be sentimental either." His eyebrow lifted slightly. I held his gaze. "You don't need a queen," I told him quietly. "You need a strategist." For the first time since I entered the mansion, the great wolf of the city smiled. But it wasn't amusement. It was recognition. The smile didn't last long. Men like him rarely allowed emotion to stay visible, but the moment lingered in the air between us, sharp and electric, as if two predators had quietly acknowledged the other's claws. He turned away first. "Walk with me," he said. It wasn't a request. We moved through the mansion in silence. The hallways were vast and immaculate, yet something about them felt unfinished, like a palace that had grown too quickly around the man who owned it. Power, I had learned long ago, often outpaced stability. We entered a study overlooking the dark stretch of forest behind the estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the night, the moon hanging low above the trees. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking whether I drank. I accepted the glass but didn't touch it. Instead, I studied the room. Financial reports stacked carelessly on the desk, 3 phones, 2 open laptops, a map of the city marked with colored pins. It took less than 10 seconds to understand what I was looking at. An empire built on dominance, but not on structure. "You're analyzing," he said behind me. Not annoyed, interested. "It's a habit," I replied. He leaned against the edge of the desk, arms folded. "And what does your habit tell you?" I turned slowly. "That your organization expanded too fast." The room went very still. "Your transportation fronts are profitable," I continued calmly, nodding toward the map. "But your construction division is bleeding money. Whoever manages it is either incompetent or stealing from you." One of the men near the door shifted. The alpha didn't look at him. His gaze stayed on me. "You've been here less than 5 minutes. I've been studying men like you for 30 years. Silence returned, heavy, calculating. Outside the window, wind moved through the trees in a low whisper. Then something strange happened. For the briefest moment, the air carried a scent that didn't belong to the room. Wild, sharp, ancient. Wolf. The realization settled quietly in my mind. So the rumors were true. The city's most feared crime lord wasn't only powerful, he was something older, something primal. His eyes sharpened slightly, as if he sensed the shift in my thoughts. Most people, he said slowly, spend their first night here trying to understand how dangerous I am. I'm not most people. No, he agreed. Then he asked the question that truly mattered. And you're not afraid of me? I held his gaze steady. Fear is useful, but only when it's accurate. Another pause stretched between us, longer this time, more thoughtful. Finally, he pushed away from the desk and stepped closer. Not threatening, curious. You really believe you can help run my empire? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I glanced once more at the scattered reports, the organized systems, the small cracks forming beneath enormous power. Then I looked back at him. You don't need a queen, I said quietly. You need a strategist. For the second time that night, the most dangerous alpha in the city studied me as if seeing something entirely new. Not a widow, not a political pawn, but a mind. The marriage happened 3 days later. No press, no celebration, just a quiet ceremony in a private room overlooking the city that feared him. The officiant spoke quickly, carefully, as though the walls themselves were listening. 2 witnesses stood near the door, both armed, both pretending not to notice the unusual nature of the union they were observing. A widow the board had tried to erase, and the man whose name made politicians whisper. When the vows ended, the room remained strangely silent. He studied me as if expecting something to change now that the contract was complete. Perhaps tears, perhaps hesitation. Instead, I simply placed the ring on my finger and met his gaze calmly. Is this the part where I'm supposed to look nervous? I asked. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. You're not what I expected. I hear that often. We left the room side by side, the quiet echo of our footsteps following us down the long marble hallway. By nightfall, the house had already adjusted to my presence. Staff moved differently around me, watchful, uncertain. Guards opened doors a little faster, conversations lowered when I entered rooms. Power rearranges people quickly. But inside the mansion, not everyone welcomed the change. His inner circle watched me the way wolves watch an unfamiliar animal entering their territory. Suspicious, hostile. One of them, a thick-shouldered man with restless eyes named Victor, finally spoke during dinner. You really think a corporate widow understands how our world works? The question was directed at the alpha, but the insult was meant for me. I set my glass down gently. I don't need to understand your world, I said calmly. Only your numbers. A quiet ripple moved around the table. Victor leaned back, amused. And what do our numbers say? They say your shipping operation lost 12% this quarter. The room froze. I continued before anyone could interrupt. They say your security contracts are overpriced, your logistics network has overlapping routes, and someone is skimming from your port distribution. Now every man at the table was staring. Victor's smile faded. The alpha didn't look at him. His gaze remained on me. How long did it take you to figure that out? He asked. About 20 minutes. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Then Victor laughed, but it sounded forced. You're guessing. No, I replied evenly. I'm observing. I turned slightly toward the alpha. You built your empire on instinct and power. That works for conquering territory. Then I let the next words settle carefully. But empires don't collapse from enemies outside. They collapse from rot inside. The alpha leaned back slowly, his eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in concentration. For the first time, he wasn't testing me. He was considering the possibility that I might actually be right. And somewhere beneath that realization, a new shift began. He had expected a broken widow. Instead, he had married a strategist. The following weeks revealed something far more dangerous than enemies outside the mansion. Decay. Not loud, not obvious. Quiet. The kind that spreads through an empire when men begin believing power alone will protect them. I started watching everything. Not openly, not dramatically, just quietly. At breakfast, I listened to the way his captains spoke to each other. At night, I reviewed the financial ledgers that no one believed I understood. I studied the rhythm of deliveries, the movement of money, the tone of loyalty in every room. Patterns always emerge if you're patient, and one pattern began appearing everywhere. Victor, the thick-shouldered lieutenant who'd laughed at me during dinner. His name surfaced in too many reports: shipping delays, missing inventory, security contracts signed through companies that traced back to him. Small amounts each time, but over months those small amounts became something larger, something dangerous. The Alpha resisted my observations at first, not angrily, but instinctively. Victor had been with him for years. Loyalty, like fear, can blur judgment. "You're looking for betrayal," he said one evening in the study. "I'm looking for truth." He leaned against the window, moonlight catching the sharp angles of his face. "You've been here less than a month." "And in that month," I said calmly, placing 3 financial reports on the desk, "your port revenue has dropped 7%. He didn't respond, so I continued. 2 shipments disappeared last quarter, both under Victor's oversight. Still silence. "And yesterday," I added softly, "one of your logistics managers transferred money to a shell company Victor controls." The room grew very still. He stepped closer to the desk, slowly. His eyes moved across the documents, the numbers, the timestamps, the quiet proof hidden inside ordinary paperwork. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he exhaled once, low, controlled. "You're certain?" "I don't deal in certainty," I replied. "I deal in probability." His gaze lifted to mine. "And the probability?" "That Victor isn't stealing alone." Something dark flickered behind his eyes. Not rage, recognition. The scent of wolf filled the room again, ancient, restrained power pressing quietly against the edges of the air. "You predicted the betrayal before it happened," he said slowly. "No," I shook my head. "I predicted the moment it would reveal itself." Silence returned. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed once. Not loudly, but with genuine disbelief. "I spent 10 years building this empire, and I spent 30 years watching empires collapse." I folded the final report and slid it toward him. "Your enemies think you're dangerous because of your strength." He studied me carefully now, the way a wolf studies something rare. "What do you think?" "I think strength built your throne," I said quietly. Then I met his gaze without hesitation. "But strategy is what will keep it." The betrayals surfaced 3 nights later. Not with shouting, not with violence, just a quiet message that one of the port warehouses had been breached. Victor insisted it was a rival crew testing their defenses. He spoke confidently, loudly, as if volume alone could manufacture truth. But I watched the Alpha instead. He said nothing during the briefing. He simply listened, and every few minutes his eyes drifted toward me. Later that night, we stood alone in the study, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the glass. "You expected this," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You knew Victor would make a move." "I knew desperation would force his hand." The Alpha studied me the way men study a complicated puzzle. "Explain." I walked to the desk and opened the map of the port routes. "People who steal slowly don't stop. They escalate." My finger traced one of the shipping lanes. When Victor realized I was examining the accounts, he had 2 choices: run or create chaos. He nodded once. And he chose chaos. Exactly. A slow silence settled in the room as the full pattern revealed itself. The stolen shipments, the shell companies, the sudden warehouse incident. Then his gaze sharpened. "You used him." "I anticipated him." The distinction mattered. I turned the map toward him. "Victor thinks tonight's breach will distract you while his partners move a larger shipment through the secondary port." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're certain?" I held his gaze calmly. "You'll find out in about 20 minutes." For a moment, the room was completely still. Then the Alpha reached for his phone and issued 3 short orders to his security team. No anger, no raised voice, just quiet authority. When he hung up, he looked at me again, longer this time, different, not as an opponent, not as a guest, as something else. Respect. "You see things before they happen," he said. "I see the patterns people leave behind." Another pause stretched between us. The wolf scent lingered faintly in the air again, though this time it felt less like a warning and more like presence. "You're not afraid of the men around me," he said. "I'm rarely afraid of predictable people." "And me?" His voice was softer now, curious. I met his eyes steadily. "You're the only unpredictable variable in this house." A faint smile touched his mouth again, but this time it held something warmer, something quieter. "Most people try to impress me with loyalty," he said. "You impressed me with intelligence." Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he said something that surprised even himself. "I didn't marry you for your mind." "I know, but I should have." The realization hung between us like the beginning of something neither of us had planned, and somewhere in that quiet shift of power and understanding, the most dangerous alpha in the city began to fall, not for beauty, not for submission, but for the one thing no one else had ever offered him, a mind that could stand beside his throne. The security reports arrived just before midnight. Victor had indeed attempted to move a second shipment through the secondary port. The Alpha's men were already waiting. No confrontation, no gunfire, just quiet arrests and a series of locked doors that would not open again for those involved. When the last message came through confirming the operation had been secured, the Alpha set his phone down slowly. He didn't celebrate. Men like him rarely did. Instead, he looked at me. "You built this trap. I predicted where he would step. You manipulated the entire board tonight." "Not manipulated," I corrected gently. "Directed." The faintest breath of amusement crossed his expression. "You really are dangerous." The word lingered between us. Not accusation, recognition. Outside the tall windows of the study, the moon had climbed higher above the forest, casting silver light across the dark trees. The quiet felt deeper now, as though the house itself understood something had shifted. His empire had survived betrayal, but something else had changed too, his trust. "You knew Victor wasn't the only one," he said. "Yes, and yet you didn't expose them all tonight." "No." He watched me closely, waiting. "Why?" "Because power vacuums are messy. If you remove everyone at once, the structure collapses." I stepped closer to the desk and pointed at the remaining names on the financial ledger. 2 more are connected to Victor's accounts, but they don't know you're aware yet. The Alpha's eyes darkened slightly. "You want them to reveal themselves." "Yes. And how long will that take?" 3 days. He studied me again, slower this time. "You are restructuring my entire empire." "I'm stabilizing it." Silence filled the room again, but it felt different now. Less tense, more thoughtful. After a moment, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey again and handed one to me. This time, I took a sip. The warmth spread slowly, steady and controlled. "Do you know what my captains expected when I agreed to this marriage?" he asked. "That you were humiliating me." He nodded once. They thought I was bringing a helpless bride into my house. I tilted my head slightly, and instead, his gaze held mine. Instead, I brought a corporate predator into my empire. The words carried no resentment, only respect. Outside, a distant wolf howl drifted faintly through the trees, the sound ancient and quiet beneath the wind. For a moment, we both listened. Then he spoke again. "You didn't come here to survive this arrangement." "No. You came to build something." "Yes." He took another slow drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "And what exactly are you building?" I set the glass down carefully. Then I gave him the same answer I had given myself the night I signed the marriage contract: an empire that can't be destroyed from the inside. The message arrived the next morning, not through the Alpha's network, through mine. A former analyst from my old company sent it quietly, buried inside an encrypted report that looked like an ordinary financial update. Most people would have missed what it revealed, but betrayal has a signature, and I had spent years learning to recognize it. I sat in the mansion's study as sunlight filtered through the tall windows, the report open on the desk. Numbers, investment transfers, shell partnerships. At first glance, it looked like a simple expansion plan, but the deeper pattern told a different story. The board, my former board, they were moving aggressively into shipping logistics, port infrastructure, security contracts, the same industries the Alpha controlled. I leaned back slowly. Interesting. Very interesting. When he entered the room a few minutes later, he immediately noticed the expression on my face. "You found something?" "Yes." I slid the report across the desk. He scanned it quickly, his sharp eyes moving over the pages. "They're building competition." "No," I said calmly. "They're building a trap." He looked up. "Explain." "They aren't trying to outcompete you," I said. "They're trying to provoke you." His brow tightened slightly. "Why?" "Because if you retaliate aggressively, they'll hand evidence to federal investigators." The silence that followed felt heavier than any gunfire. "They want a war," he said slowly. "Yes." "And they expect me to start it?" I nodded. "They believe you're predictable." A faint, dangerous smile touched his mouth. "And what do you believe?" "I believe they made a very expensive mistake." He studied the report again. "These men destroyed your company." "They tried." "And now they're targeting mine?" "Yes." He leaned back against the desk, arms folded, the quiet weight of the wolf settling around him again. "They don't realize you're here." "No. They think you disappeared." That was the intention. The room grew quiet as the full implications settled between us. The board believed they had buried the woman who built their empire. Now they were unknowingly provoking the one man powerful enough to destroy them. "They ruined your company." "Yes." "And now they're challenging my territory?" I held his gaze. "They thought they were burying me." He remembered the line immediately. "I saw the throne," he finished. For a moment, the two of us stood there in silence, the strategy unfolding naturally between us like pieces of a chessboard arranging themselves. "They want a war," he said again. "Yes. And what do you suggest instead?" I closed the report slowly. "We give them exactly they expect." He raised an eyebrow. "A mistake." Then I leaned forward slightly. "Just not the one they planned." His eyes sharpened with interest. "Go on." "They want to destroy both of us using this alliance," I said quietly. "They believe this marriage is your weakness." "And yours." "Yes." The faintest smile returned to my lips. "Which means they will never see the real play coming." "And what's the real play?" he asked. I met his gaze without hesitation. "We take everything back. Not just revenge, not just survival. Everything." The plan didn't begin with confrontation. It began with silence. For 2 weeks, the Alpha's empire appeared unchanged. His captains continued their routines, shipments moved through the ports, and the city's quiet balance of power remained undisturbed. To anyone watching from the outside, nothing had shifted. That was the point. The board believed they were setting a trap, so we let them believe it. Each evening we met in the study overlooking the forest, the quiet room becoming something between a war room and a laboratory for strategy. Financial maps covered the long desk now, shipping routes, corporate acquisitions, political donations. The Alpha stood beside me one night, studying the web of connections I had drawn between his operations and the companies my former board had quietly acquired. "They're expanding faster than I expected," he said. They're desperate, I replied. Desperate men make mistakes. Exactly. My finger moved across one of the reports. They believe you'll attack their new shipping subsidiary. And you want me to. No. I slid another document across the desk. I want you to invest in it. His eyebrow lifted slowly. You want me to fund the company they're using to destroy me? Yes. The silence stretched for several seconds as he studied the numbers. Then he began to understand. They'll welcome the investment, he said. They'll believe they've baited the wolf. Yes. And once I'm inside their structure, you'll see every account, every partner, every illegal transfer they've hidden. A slow smile appeared on his face. They won't realize they've handed us the keys. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again, carrying that faint, wild scent that always surrounded him when his instincts sharpened. You've been planning this longer than you admit, he said, since the day they removed me from the board. He studied me quietly. You're not trying to destroy them. No, you're trying to replace them. Yes, the distinction mattered. He walked slowly around the desk, stopping beside the window. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, unaware that the balance of power controlling it was quietly being rewritten inside this room. They sold you to me believing you were powerless, he said. Yes, they thought they were buying my silence. They underestimated both of us. He turned back toward me then, something deeper in his gaze now. Respect had already formed between us, but something else had begun to grow beside it. Trust. You know what my captains call me, he said quietly. The Wolf King. Yes, and yet you walk into my empire and reorganize it without hesitation. I've spent my entire life building empires, I said calmly. He studied me one last time before nodding slowly. He sold you to the wolf, he said. Yes. I held his gaze, steady and certain. But you were the real power. And somewhere far beyond the mansion walls, the men who believed they had buried me were about to discover that their greatest mistake had not been betrayal. It had been underestimation. The first sign the strategy was working appeared quietly, not through violence, not through intimidation, through numbers. 3 weeks after the Alpha invested in the board's new shipping subsidiary, their executives welcomed him publicly as a strategic partner. The announcement spread through financial circles like wildfire. Analysts called it unexpected. Commentators called it bold. The board called it victory. They believed they had done exactly what they planned, provoked the Wolf King into stepping inside their trap. But inside the mansion, the atmosphere had changed. The study that once held scattered reports was now an organized command center. Screens displayed shipping movements across multiple ports. Financial ledgers were no longer loose stacks of paper, but structured dashboards that revealed patterns instantly. Order had replaced instinct. Structure had replaced chaos. The Alpha stood beside the large map of the city one evening, watching a new shipment route appear on the screen. You rebuilt the backbone of my logistics network in less than a month, he said. I reorganized what was already there. You made it profitable. Profit follows efficiency. He studied the map again, slower this time. For years, my empire relied on loyalty, he said. Men I trusted. And loyalty is valuable, but loyalty without accountability creates corruption. He nodded once. And now? Now the system protects itself. He walked to the window, looking out across the dark forest beyond the estate. The wolf presence around him had grown calmer over the past weeks, less like a coiled weapon and more like a quiet force at rest. You didn't just fix the problems Victor created. No, you changed the entire structure. Yes, because the deeper truth was simple. Empires rarely fall because of enemies. They fall because of inefficiency. The Alpha turned back toward me, his expression thoughtful. When I first met you, I thought this arrangement would be temporary. And now? Now I'm starting to understand something. I waited. You weren't sent here to survive this marriage. No, you came here to build something stronger. Yes,
He moved closer to the desk, glancing at the financial reports we had been reviewing all evening. The board's companies were already revealing weaknesses through the investment partnership: hidden debt, suspicious transfers, offshore accounts that would not survive proper scrutiny. The trap they built was slowly closing around them instead. They thought this alliance would weaken both of us, he said. They misunderstood the situation. His gaze lifted to mine again. You've turned my empire into something different. Better. The faintest smile appeared on his face. I expected a political bride. And instead? He considered the answer carefully before speaking. Instead, I gained the architect of a stronger empire. Outside, the wind moved softly through the forest again, carrying the distant echo of wolves somewhere in the dark. And inside the mansion, the foundations of two empires, his and mine, were quietly becoming one. The evidence began appearing slowly, one transaction at a time. The board believed their financial structure was invisible, hidden behind shell companies, offshore transfers, and a network of loyal accountants who had spent years disguising the truth. But they had made one mistake. They had invited the Wolf King inside their system. Every report from the new shipping subsidiary now passed through our network before reaching their offices. Every contract revealed another layer of quiet corruption. I sat in the study late one evening, reviewing the latest files when the Alpha entered. "You're still working?" he said. "I'm finishing something." He stepped beside the desk, his presence calm but powerful, the quiet energy of the wolf resting beneath his composure. "What did you find?" I turned the screen toward him. "Everything." His eyes moved across the documents. Bribery accounts, hidden political payments, illegal port expansions approved through falsified permits. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he leaned back slowly. "They're not just corrupt. No, they're reckless." I nodded. "They've been operating under the assumption no one would ever look closely. And now? Now we're looking very closely." He studied the evidence again, the faintest edge of dark amusement appearing in his expression. "They tried to use my reputation to destroy themselves. Yes, and they thought you were powerless. That assumption helped." Silence filled the room as the final pieces of the strategy aligned. "They wanted a scandal that would bring down my empire," he said. "Yes, and now we have something much bigger." I closed the last report and folded my hands calmly. A complete record of financial crimes, political bribery, and corporate fraud. His gaze sharpened. "You're not planning to destroy them through violence. No, you're planning to destroy them legally. Yes." The difference mattered. Power taken by force invites retaliation. Power taken through exposure leaves no defense. For a moment, the Alpha simply watched me. "You've turned their trap into a weapon." I redirected it. "And now?" "Now we choose the moment." He walked to the window, the city lights stretching across the horizon like a field of distant stars. "They tried to silence you," he said quietly. "Yes, they thought this marriage would erase you." I joined him beside the window. Instead, it gave me access. He turned slightly toward me, studying me with that same careful focus he had shown the night we first met. "Do you know what my captains call you now?" "No. They say you're the most dangerous person in this house." "That seems exaggerated." He shook his head once. "No." His voice carried quiet certainty. "You became something much more valuable than an ally." I raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" His answer came without hesitation. "The greatest weapon my empire has ever had." And somewhere across the city, the men who believed they had buried a widow were about to discover that the woman they tried to silence had been preparing their downfall the entire time.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets you know when new videos drop. Lastly, and turn on notifications so you never miss a video.